It's really exciting to be here. The second day of GFF looks even more brimming with excitement, and I have an amazing set of panelists to discuss a extremely topical point, CBDC, right? Not just in India, but world over, but India has definitely taken the stage forefront on that one. This one is not just exciting from a CBDC perspective, but also personally for me. Being on a fintech side and a founder, it's rarely an opportunity I get to pose the questions to the regulator and the bankers in a public forum. So excited just about that. So I think with CBDC, personally, my vision would be that someday we actually have maybe a player like PhonePe completing its offerings on the payment side with cash as digital rupee that automatically gets transformed on a daily basis, maybe from direct deposits, to be used for petty cash transactions in remote areas where there's no connectivity in a very seamless manner. Let's face it, even today, when we go out and are traveling, we do actually, as a backup, keep some amount of cash. The QR is there everywhere. The UPI QR may be there everywhere, but there's a possibility that it may not work, and cash ultimately is the savior. So if CBDC becomes that savior in the digital format, it kind of completes the story, at least for me. But to start things off, I would love for the CGM RBI, Mr. Suvendrapati, to kind of share where we are with the CBDC pilot and what's next in the phase for CBDC.
Yeah, good morning to everyone, and thanks Rahul, and really pleased to be here as part of this Global FinTech Festival and see a very good gathering out here. Yes, today we are going to talk about CBDC, and all of us should know that India started its CBDC pilot for the wholesale on 1st of November 2022 and on the retail on 1st of December 2022. And we are some distance into it now. So I would say that we are on the retail side, just to give you a perspective, not many people would be familiar with what's happening exactly. Although I believe some of you would have downloaded the CBDC app and started experimenting or playing with it or experimenting how it functions. But let me give you a status on where we are today and give you a little bit background to it as well. And then I will talk about what's some of the plans that we have for the future. As on date, initially when we started with, on the retail side, I would be focusing more. On the retail side, we started our journey with 4 banks and with 4 cities in the closed user group. And today we are at 26 cities and with 13 partner banks. And 2 of them are sitting alongside my panel who are there in the pilot. In terms of number of customers onboarded, we started in December, and our initial target was to reach a milestone, some kind of an internal target that we had set for ourselves to reach 1 million customers onboarded by the end of June. And I must compliment the entire bank partners who are with us in this pilot for their efforts. And we did cross that number very handsomely by June. And as on date, we are somewhere around 1.5 million customers onboarded onto the system. And we have about 0.3 or 0.32 million merchants who are directly onboarded into the CBDC platform. So initially, as we went along the journey, we have made several additions to this process. When we started, we wanted to introduce this being a new innovation it's nothing but a currency in a digital form. That is the way India is looking at this. So we wanted to introduce this in a very, very non-disruptive manner. So the process was absolutely, gradual, and we are testing the operational resilience and technical efficiency as we are going along this pilot. There are many, macro-financial issues which is also surrounding this entire CBDC. There is this debate with regard to the bank disintermediation, whether the CBDC should be remunerative, non-remunerative, and what could be the other features associated with it. What should be the level of anonymity and things like that. So just to give you a perspective how we have, arrived at this design considerations is that we looked at it point of view of cash. It is something which is close to the, should be seen as a digital form of the currency. So in that sense, it does not carry any interest and it is non-remunerative in design. And the distribution structure, we are also conscious of the fact that although it's a direct central bank liability, it cannot be, the central banks need not have a direct interface with the customer because first, they are not present everywhere. Second, it is the banks who have been onboarding the customers and they are very familiar with the KYC journey and they are the best place to undertake those activities. So the distribution architecture as on date is a two-tier structure where the Reserve Bank produces and mints these digital currencies and the distribution takes place through the partner banks. But this is again for the pilot. What exactly will unfold in the ultimate thing, we are also learning from it. Now, these are the two design considerations we had. And when we started the pilot, then what initially we, acceptance infrastructure. So one thing that we observed that CBDC, we developed a separate QR code. And merchants had to keep two separate QR codes at their counters so that people can, pay the CBDC through the CBDC QR code and make a UPI transaction through the UPI QR code. Now, that was a challenge or a friction perceived by many of the merchants. So during the course of the pilot, getting the feedback from the ecosystem, we first operationalized a limited QR interoperability. And that, after achieving that, now recently, very recently, all the partner banks have operationalized full QR interoperability. I'm happy to announce that many of those who have not experimented this, you can try it out. As far as our testing, it is working fine. So we would look forward that all of you, with this initiative, there is a full QR interoperability. What it means exactly is once you open your CBDC app and you scan a UPI QR code, then if the merchant is onboarded into the CBDC system, the transaction will go through as a CBDC transaction, or else a UPI transaction will be auto-triggered, auto-initiated. So this has enabled to reduce the friction that the merchants were facing, that to placing two QR codes separately. Also, I believe it would have reduced the additional cost that could be associated with onboarding merchants and supplying them with QR codes and those things. So these are the features that we have unfolded right now. Peeking into the future, we would definitely look at many other possibilities and use cases, such as one promise that the CBDC holds for the entire world, not only India, is to transform the cross-border payments ecosystem. Even today, despite all those technological developments and the cross-border payment still is faced with multiple challenges, like the low speed, lack of adequate transparency in the payment process, and high costs. Some of the estimates say that the cost of the transactions can go up to 6% of the transaction value, and it's really very punishing to the customers at the end. So one feature that CBDC holds the potential because of its digital nature is to transform this space by removing many of the frictions in the process and bring efficiency to this entire ecosystem, both in terms of cost and time. So my appeal to all the fintechs and brilliant minds and the technologists, technocrats to solve this, how do we come up with a proper design structure, is to leverage on the potential of this side and bring down costs, which would be very, very beneficial for the entire. And to give a statistics, India is one of the largest recipients of the inward remittances. In 2021, according to the World Bank estimates, around 87 billion was the inward remittance that we received. And this is something we should be aspiring for, how to make this frictionless and how to make it more efficient in terms of cost. There are other features that we would be exploring as we go along with regard to the programmability, what is known as, you can have a purpose-bound money. So these are some of the things I would talk later. I think I have taken enough time in the first question itself. over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that, setting the stage on where we are with CBDC and the potential. Ajay, as part of Yes Bank, you've been very early on involved with CBDC, the two-tier architecture that Sir spoke about. He also spoke about the disintermediation of banks. Cash is not really the friend of banks. So, what is your view? Where does CBDC lie in the scheme of things for a bank and a banker?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. And I think before I come to the question, I just want to acknowledge, I think the role which the regulator, has played in creating, in my view, what so far, as a pride for India, we always say, this is the UPI moment. I would like to believe that in the next few years, we will also probably, say, this was the CBDC moment. That is the future which I believe that CBDC will have, a role to play in, in the country. The full credit of that, actually, of course, the vision right from governor down, to the regulator. But I think most importantly, Suvendu sir and the newly minted fintech department who has minted a newly digital currency and his team here. I think they've done a stupendous job in terms of the overall execution of CBDC as we see today, and it's not a small feat. And Suvendu sir mentioned about the numbers. We as of last July, there were almost 1.5 million users on CBDC, 300,000 merchants on CBDC, and with the innovation that Suvendu sir mentioned, which is the interoperability of QR between UPI and CBDC, overnight that 300,000 has turned into 5 crores, right? So that's the level of innovation, and I can challenge that there is no other country globally which could have boasted of innovation at this scale and this proportion in a record time of 1 year of launch. In fact, the launch itself was very, very quick as compared to some of the other countries. So, sorry, I just wanted to, give that context, Rahul, first. Short answer to your question, it is, CBDC is going to be extremely, extremely valuable, for the banks. And let me, spend some time in terms of why, I believe, that's the case. So CBDC, as we all, know by now, it's actually a regulator-blessed initiative. And a bank-executed initiative, like Suvendu sir had mentioned, the distribution happens through the banks. It is important to understand the motivation of why CBDC was launched. Primarily, and it's on two parts, right? Wholesale and retail. I believe the use case is more on the retail side. On the wholesale side, to start with, right now, the use case which is being done is more government security settlement between the banks. While, of course, there are more use cases which I will dwell on it later. But purely, if you look at the retail side, and Rahul, I think you will appreciate that, and you also alluded to the fact that cash is something which nobody likes, right? And there is a huge cost of handling cash. It's of course very cumbersome, the regulator spends between 5,000 to 6,000 crores purely on minting and managing cash, and that's only Reserve Bank, right? There is also a huge cash cost which banks incur, which the ecosystem, corporates incur, customers incur. Then there is also the cost of counterfeit, which of course nobody can assess. So all of that is is a huge cost to manage. Of course, very inefficient and leads to corruption as well, right? So CBDC, to the extent which can replace cash, and I don't think the intent is to make India a cashless economy. It is, I think, a less cash economy because you cannot eliminate cash completely. So to the extent that it gets replaced with CBDC, I think there is the value which we will see both in terms of financial efficiencies as well as operational efficiencies is the primary driver, both for the regulator and of course, for the banks and the other ecosystem, I think is a primary benefit number one. Second, in my view, it gives, and UPI is already there, and Rahul, I think full credit to you, for spearheading that whole initiative. PhonePe is, of course, leader on that. So that, will always remain. We have seen record volumes, and I think we'll continue to see that. But CBDC with similar features, and with the added feature of being a currency, right, gives merchants and consumer another option to settle low cost transactions, right, or low value transactions. Because CBDC is token based, I believe that not only I believe, but it is a fact actually that there is no other digital payment in the country today which gives instant settlement at zero cost. Because CBDC is token based, the settlement happens instantly between the consumer and the merchant, unlike other options which happen in batches, or other modes, right? So that, in my view, could be an option. I know it's a bit controversial, but I'll still make this statement that, given now we have two options, if UPI is now left market driven, it could potentially give merchants, fintechs, as well as banks the best of both worlds. That is, have a very superior product which could be priced, and have a very superior product because it is currency, not a digital money, which is available free, right? So it becomes a merchant choice, customer choice, what you would like to use. Then, of course, is the last mile penetration, and Suedu sir also spoke about that. In my view, that is really where the value of CBDC will come, both for banks as well as for the ecosystem at large. As mentioned in the RBI white paper as well, one of the primary use cases for CBDC will be offline and programmability, which sir also spoke about. And that use case, when it is solved, will actually help CBDC penetrate where other payment modes have not been able to do so far, right? And which is really where instances of operational cash is a lot more. So that, could be solved via CBDC. And that's where the real money, real value from a financial inclusion perspective, will also come. Cross-border remittances, again, Suendu sir already spoke about, and that again, both from a P2P remittances, where India is the largest beneficiary with almost 110 billion, very high cost, again, ruled by correspondent banks, so there is a cost involved on that. There is time delay involved on that. With CBDC, and of course, but it will require a larger network of countries, to be prepared for that. But once that happens, I think the instant settlement, even for cross-border remittances, could be a huge operational and a financial efficiency tool, for the banks. So I think that broadly, summarizes from my point what benefits, value, the CBDC could provide to the banking ecosystem. But all of this, would not be possible if it is not accessible, right? And today, while I spoke about 1.3 million users, but we know the success of UPI and the number of users, who today use UPI. So while with the interoperability recently announced, I think the merchant side has been addressed, but there will be some policy amendments required, to solve the same thing on the consumer side. And once I believe that happens, it could really change the game, for CBDC accessibility as well as usability in the overall financial ecosystem and the banks as a large. And banks, of course, there is also commercial value to it, while of course, there is no charge for using CBDC, but because both the consumer leg and the merchant leg is linked to the current account and saving account, it becomes like a cash management tool, right? So to load money into CBDC or, use for the merchant to collect and settle it back to the current account. For banks, it becomes a source of additional incremental CASA. So that's, of course, finally the commercial benefit as well.
Got it. Thank you, Ajay. Subtly, you put in there that there should be healthy paranoia about getting onto the CBDC bandwagon for everybody, including fintechs. On that note, Akhil, you've been leading the charge on digital transformation at a very, very large PSU, Bank of Baroda. You had a lot of partnerships. How do you see CBDC as an opportunity and new currency to innovate on? And an additional question, how do you see the fintech ecosystem partnering with the banks who, along with the RBI, are the clear distributors of this currency?
Sure. First, I will just ride on the coattails of what Ajay mentioned. This whole innovation space that we're looking at would be impossible if the Reserve Bank would not have come up with this very unique payment rails. And I think this really opens up the world of innovation as we look at it. Now, some numbers, of course, both Suvendu sir and Ajay have waxed eloquent around the broad basics of CBDC. But, from where I look at it and what gets me very excited about this is, at a very high level, you see the M1, which is the currency in circulation, is close to about 23, 25 lakh crore. The bank deposits, which is where all the payments, digital payments today happen, is about 180 lakh crore, about 9 times of it, right? Now, CBDC, in my view, will chip on parts of both these. Now, on one end, you're looking at something which is very high cost, very inefficient, and that is about 25 lakh crore. And to manage, there is a huge ecosystem today that goes into managing that cash. And it is, of course, at the merchant level, there's a huge cash cost, but also at the bank's level, there is enormous cost of cash handling. Everything that Ajay mentioned around, there are about 4,000 currency chests in the country, right? There are about 3,500 currency coin depots. The cost of printing of cash. And I was just looking at some statistic. To print a 10 rupee note, it takes about 10% of the cost. And that is very high, right? So the opportunity taps into multiple value pockets across. It is good for the regulator. It is good for the banks. It is also very good for the merchant and the end consumer. And in my view, the starting position is for us to be able to articulate these benefits very well for the customer. Because we may speak about CBDC very eloquently in BKC, but if we have to go to the depths of the country, we will have to fight customer 101 mindset. Why CBDC? Why not cash? Or why not UPI? Right? And to that, I feel that we will have to obviously make the case as to why this gives you all the efficiency that you have in the digital payment, but it has the anonymity of cash, instant settlement, right? It is currency. It is a liability on the Reserve Bank. It is not a liability on any A bank or B bank, which has its own risk also. So I think that, to my mind, is I get most excited by that part. Now, where I see the opportunity will come for everybody across this room and in the country is when we platformize CBDC. Today, it runs as a monorail, right? So today, it's a two-tiered architecture. The Reserve Bank issues the currency, the bank distributes, right? And then the bank takes care of the issuing of not the issuing, but the distribution of the token. I think where the exciting part will come is once the pilot matures, we will get to a stage where we will be able to have a hybrid architecture, where we will be able to get another tier of players and fintechs and the big techs and everybody else who will also then get involved in innovating on top of these rails. Now, you obviously know, Rahul, that there are possibly about 10 use cases which you can dream up overnight, right? And it starts from, and every payment system has it, right? It starts from prepaid, all the way goes to postpaid, credit, right? And everything in between, including bill payments, recurring payments, mandate, invoice attachments, etc. And all these things, I feel, once you have answered why CBDC, you will be able to get to a point where this innovation on top of it is a free-for-all. It is a game open for everybody. And given that it is such a fantastic new payment rails, there will be a lot of value creation that will happen. I think the Reserve Bank, of course, has iterated on the pilot, and today, of course, and look, it's a payment system, right? And it is a very sensitive system, given that it is no longer bank deposits, it is actually currency. So I think the call of the day is to measure the progress, to temper, and make sure that the foundation is very strong. And I all credit to Suvendu sir and the team to be actually able to handhold and validate all the assumptions that have been made pre-facto. And if they hold, and if they do not hold, then what needs to change? And you've seen that. One of the critical assumptions was what he spoke about was another QR will not work. And this, to my mind, is the beauty of the digital public infrastructure of the country, where if there are already about 5 crore active QRs, overnight you have the ability to just piggyback on that infrastructure. Now that QR is already there, and it is all now the customer has to do is take his CBDC app, which today stands as a separate app, but sure, it could be any app, right? It could, once you platformize it, then it can be any app, it can get embedded. And that, I think, is where the adoption of CBDC will be accelerated. UPI took us wherever we are to the stellar numbers of about 10 billion transactions a month over a period of maybe 7 years, around 2016 to 23. In my view, CBDC can get there in half the time, lot faster. The basics is something I think we will have to get right, and once that is there, we will get the innovation engine running on top of it. And you know what, look, banks can do as much, the regulator can guide us as much, NPCI will obviously come in and do their bit. But I think once the 8 or 10,000 fintechs in the country start building on top of that innovation engine, sky's the limit. There is a very key element of CBDC, and we can talk about it subsequently, which I want to touch upon, is the programmability aspect. That opens up the world of innovation almost 10 times. Cash in my pocket cannot be programmed. I cannot say that, please honor a 500 rupee note only under ABC circumstances. But I can pretty well program CBDC for anything. And I was just last night doing some, blue skies thinking on what all can be done. And I think it's just incredible what you can do with this aspect. And maybe I won't take much time. We'll probably take it up, but we'll touch upon that in the next.
Thanks a lot, Akhil. I think the comment on BKC being a bubble and educating the country on CBDC, like UPI, is a very valid point. And personally, my takeaway, I think someday I'm going to be able to set standing instructions in PhonePe to convert some bank deposits into cash tokens and be complete. So I'll be waiting for that once the platformization finishes. Deepak, heading Accenture, sitting all the way to the left, you do have a true left field view to the bankers and the Reserve Bank. Would love to get your perspective specifically on verticals outside in that can benefit significantly from CBDC.
Yep, okay, thanks. I think whatever we have said here is pretty strong, right? So I want to put an analogy to what CBDC is before and then give you the outside-in perspective. First of all, you need to see CBDC as a Swiss knife, Swiss Army knife, right? You can open up anything and then tackle any problem you have in the economy or in the nation. So that's the power which CBDC brings to the table. If you keep that in your mind and then say, hey, what's happening? And we being doing about 70% of the CBDC pilots and the programs around the world. One thing which I need to tell, which is very unique about India, and thanks to Suvendu sir and the RBI, is building the second rail, which is a redundancy rail, right? You have UPI. The entire world is trying to copy UPI, right? And now we are getting 2 steps ahead and saying we will have another rail, which will give you cash tokens, which, like what Ajay said, which will give you a zero cost to do your transaction and get that remittance very quickly, which is not heard of because everyone is still trying to do a digital money, and we have already done digital money and then getting into CBDC. Now, keeping that in mind, I want to bring few perspectives which we have all spoken about. Number one, digital wallets, right? Now, you could insert the digital wallets in any app, and you have your own app, right? And then you having digital wallet and having CBDC will increase financial inclusion to underbanks and unbanks, right? And with offline, which we are trying to solve with Suvendu sir, if we crack that, then financial inclusion is at the highest peak. And we would be better than our literacy rate, where we will have our financial inclusions beating everything. Second, the government services. Today we spend a lot, and we are an economy where we have a lot towards the government programs. And with CBDC, you could make that very fast, where the payments happen directly, which we call the direct benefit transfers, can happen very quickly. And with zero frauds, zero leakages, and on the dot, right? So which is a great thing to start with. And then finally, I want to bring two perspectives which we are not heard of, and India has that ability to do it. And I call this as central bank digital identity. Combine Aadhaar power with CBDC. Unheard of. If you can give, then you do KYCs everywhere. We spend a lot of money, banks spend a lot of money, then you have to do AMLs and others. Now if CBDC comes with its own identity and the ability to identify while you do the transactions, while you do the financial services, this can't be done by any other country because our identity is digital, our currency becomes digital, then central bank digital identities will take it off the charts. And the last thing is what I call as interoperability. Though we called about, and Answer did a brilliant thing of bringing one QR code for UPI and banks, right? But I want to take this to another level where you could do wide range of decentralized finance, right? DeFi, using CBDC with smart contracts and programmability, which we have spoken about, to bring in trustless financial agreements and transactions. And that is where I think the world is heading at, but we are at the forefront to ensure that these are all achievable in next couple of years and ahead of the curve from any other country which we have seen.
Thanks a lot, Deepak. Amazing first round. We well short over the time for the first round, so the second round, let's keep it to 2 minutes because I have some very, very interesting questions. So, Indu sir, you already touched upon Forex, the efficiency that CBDC can bring in for cross-border exchange. Can you touch a little bit on anonymity, what Deepak spoke about from a identity and traceability? How does that balance off with anonymity when this is cash? That would be very, very useful, sir.
Yeah, I'll touch upon that. And just as when I was speaking on the first, what is in the future, and now UPI interoperability is, there. And yesterday, our deputy governor also spoke on. There was a question on CBDC, and he answered. And we believe now that we are at a takeoff stage where the number of transactions will definitely scale up. And we require a critical set of numbers to understand consumer behavior and take future policy actions based on those inputs. So our immediate target would be something to see at something like 1 million transactions per day. That is our next level of targets, maybe in the coming months. That would be our target to which we would be looking at. And coming to anonymity, since we are, more or less we are perceiving CBDC like a cash-like instrument. And as Ajay said, that we are spending around 5,000 crores a year in printing alone. So our, outlook is that we are not going to replace any existing forms of payment. CBDC would act as a complement to the existing form of payments. And depending on its value proposition and offerings, the ecosystem would try to adapt. And the whole world is moving towards digital. And we see that India also needs to be future ready with its entire ecosystem, as well as supplement some part of the cash element so that we are at there. We derive some of the advantages. Rough numbers would be like if 5,000 crores, if you save around 10%, we are saving around 500 crores a year in terms of printing alone. Coming back to anonymity, since it is treated at par like cash, it should also have the features like that of cash which the cash offers. But in a digital world, everyone would argue, how would you achieve that? It's very counterintuitive that any transaction would leave a digital trail. And secondly, like in, for example, UPI transactions, these are bank transactions, right? So you draw the money, you go to a merchant or you spend there. So where did you spend, that gets reflected in your bank statements. But in cash, for example, you go out to the ATM, you draw some cash, 10,000 rupees, now you go out and spend in a restaurant or you buy some electronics. The bank or no one knows where did you spend. And especially since we are treating, our endeavor has been and is continuously going on is to achieve that kind of a balance of anonymity which the cash offers, especially with respect to the small value transactions. So this is linked to adoption. One of the unique features that the cash offers and which makes it popular is this anonymity. So we believe that digital rupee in its digital avatar also should offer some degree of anonymity, which is acceptable level of anonymity to the users, so that its adoption is also not questioned or it is taken in good spirit. Now, how do you achieve this in a real world scenario? So what we are looking at is to provide the anonymity at the transaction level anonymity, but being a custodial model that the banks would have the wallet level information on a broad level, the balances and all that, but not the transaction level. Secondly, there could be an option that could be explored. I would also like to happy to receive feedback how we can make this, but then one of the options could be to kill the transactions after giving the banks sufficient time to address the disputes or the failed transactions, and back it with the, let's say, legal measures, making such transactions, especially below a threshold, exempt from the PMLA and other requirements. So multiple possibilities are there. We are exploring all that. The final call needs to be taken. But yes, as far as the financial inclusion piece, which Deepak talked about, that is something is at this point in time, for a quick onboarding, we thought that already KYC'd account would be a good way to start. But all those opportunities and possibilities definitely will be looked at when we go along. So again, it is for, with regard to the purpose-bound money or programmability, it is, we would offer this as an option, but it is ultimately for the, departments or authorities to make use of such things. Just to give an example, if the fertilizer subsidy is being given, at the merchant outlets, that money can be restricted that the farmer, or it can be used at those specific outlets during this specific period, and then if it is not used, it can go back. So it brings efficiency as well as serves the purpose for which it can be used. There are multiple opportunities that can be explored. So we are just, I would say, at takeoff stage. So fintechs and users and everyone else, just fasten your seatbelt and see the exciting ride ahead.
That's a very, very clear message to the fintech ecosystem that there's a lot of scope to actually innovate on CBDC, and the fact that it's actually complementary to UPI. So to make it easier on Akhil and Ajay, I'm not going to ask UPI versus CBDC. Different question. UPI is at a breakneck speed of innovation. We are all trying to keep up, fintechs, banks. Now CBDC is coming. Very, very quickly, your thoughts on how you're going to be able to manage expectations that the central bank has, NPCI has, everybody has, India has from a digital transformation. Quick 30 seconds, and 30 seconds to you, Ajay.
No, I think, see, just tailing into my earlier comments on the why part, the clarity around why. Second is, when you have features like anonymity kick in very well, and third, combine this with the innovation in terms of use cases. You have to bring out new use cases, right? I think, something which has been innovated so well is zero cost, is frictionless. You will not want to go head on against that. The only way, in my opinion, is to A, ride on the coattails of it, and that has already been demonstrated by the QR adoption of UPI, the interoperability there. B, collaborate. And I think that is where, we have this option of bringing in, for example, the DBT transfers, right? And I talked about programmability. Now, imagine, you can have all sorts of programmability baked in, and this is end-use earmarking, geographical ring fencing, right? All sorts of things. That is not something which is possible because a token, a CBDC is a sovereign entity, right? It has a life of its own, and you can bake in
You
anything
can
on it.
change the program on the token on the fly.
Exactly. Well, you can, but you may not want to do it. It depends, right? I mean, it all depends on how far you want to push it. But it is so exciting, and that is not something that you can do with cash, which is dumb, or a bank deposit transfer. So I think that is what really opens it up, and I think it will be very exciting complementary phase that we are entering into. It's a new dawn.
Thank you. Ajay?
Yeah, so I'll not repeat a lot of what has already been said. So I think retail use cases we all already spoke about. I think what CBDC can also do in addition to what already exists is create value on the B2B side as well. So P2P, I think we all spoke about cross-border, offline, programmability, wallet transfers, wallet creation, and DBT transfers, all of that we already spoke about, right? But if you look at the intrinsic value of CBDC is the whole concept feature of instant settlement. And if the merchant today is already getting money via CBDC and the money is in their wallet, what stops us from creating B2B use cases where instant settlement can be a feature? So look at a corporate who is on a cash and carry model. For them, the money receiving is only one part of it. The information receiving and the settlement of, that information, credit of that information into their ERP to create a go, no go is equally important, right? So the reconciliation is also important. So CBDC with its instant settlement feature can actually create that reconciliation as a service and, give a B2B use case around it. The second, in my view, very important part would be the tokenization of assets. So wherever asset tokenization or smart contracts, are created, stocks, bonds, government securities, all of that, right? So it can be actually settled via CBDC. So the entire settlement process can be made instant, frictionless, scalable via usage of CBDC. So supply chain financing, for example, right? So all of these, in my view, asides all the P2P that we spoke about, I think there is enough value which can be created on
That's
the
a
B2B as well.
great example of where you can do focused innovation as a
Exactly.
fintech ecosystem by choosing use cases
Correct.
versus not necessarily being all broad-based.
So rely on the feature of the product and then, create use cases like Rahul, I think I don't need to say, right? PhonePe created UPI where it is today, right? So I think that focus is probably
No, and
what
I
is
think
required.
verticalizing is an opportunity versus being horizontal like PhonePe also.
Absolutely right.
Thank you, Ajay. Deepak, I'm going to let you summarize the panel, not me, with a global perspective on how is India, our Reserve Bank, Central Bank thinking about CBDC and what you've seen worldwide. And please, these would be closing remarks. And Deepak, please do the honors.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I've already spoken about where India is and where it can leap to in next 2 years, right? But I'll give you a perspective of where the world and other reserve banks are doing. The first one which comes to mind is Sweden with their project called e-Corona. E-Krona. Where did Corona come? I don't know. E-Krona. Sweden being one of the highly developed economy, what's happening there is in the rural areas, traditional banks and branches are closing down. And the introduction of CBDC has helped do the financial inclusion and get to the last mile there and with ease, right? And that's a power which we can't think of if it was anything else. Second, if we just think of going to Bahamas and think of sand dollars, and that's where Sand Dollars was introduced, and we were seeing that it was one of the digital lighthouse projects for CBDC, where it was introduced and it was used in everyday micropayments, right? And like UPI, but a digital currency token being used. Another aspect, and we are talking about dollars and how can we be less dependent on dollar, right? And this is where a small country like a Marshall Island, where CBDC is introduced to reduce the dependency on a dollar and have financial stability because of it. Moving forward, like one of the examples which Ajay spoke about, the RBA, which is Reserve Bank of Australia, are using CBDC as a tokenized asset. And they are doing experiment in which we are helping them is with the mortgage of land and then using CBDC to settle it on the fly. And the last thing is Euro. If you take the Eurozone, and there are multiple countries doing Forex and cross-border payment, though you have Euro as a currency to unite them, bringing CBDC has helped them, and then the experiment which they are doing is to help them do this at a zero cost and have those zero balance, right? So CBDC is the future, as a closing remark, but we have set our stage way high for us to leap forward than what the others are doing. So with that, I'll let you know. I know someone is whispering into your ears. With that, that's where we are.
Thank you so much, Deepak. We could keep going on, but it's been an amazing conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, a big applause for this amazing, amazing panel. Thank you so much, everybody.